I would hang out with my father. He used to comb my hair. So I don't know if this is still true, but a long time ago there used to be morning kindergarten and afternoon kindergarten. And I went to kindergarten, and my mother worked, and so my father sometimes he would actually comb my hair and get me ready for school. So here's this man's man, taking care of his daughter, and my mother and father had arguments about who could cook the best, right? And I would hang out with my father and his friends. I learned how to play cards when I was 6, 7 years old. I counted cards with the best of them, and these men thought it was really neat that I could count cards, I could count trash with them. So that bolstered a certain level of confidence in dealing it with men, right? From the perspective of being quote unquote competitive or whether I belonged. And it's an experience that, it's an experience. It's not people telling you. They can tell you after you have built that confidence up.
So there are a ton of questions from kids, and Malachi is asking, what made you want to become an astronaut?
It's so simple, Malachi. Bet you could guess. I wanted to go into space. I mean, it's nothing more. I wanted to go into space, and probably the best way to do it was to be an astronaut. When I was growing up as a little girl, I always assumed I would go into space, and that's even though the U.S. did not have any women in the astronaut program. There were no people of color in the astronaut program. I assumed that by the time I got to be old enough to be an astronaut or to actually go into space, we'd be just going there to work. I was I was, off by, 20 or 30 years in terms of just going there to work. But, I just wanted to go into space. It was just something that I would have wanted to do if there had been thousands of people or if there had never been anyone.
So King has a question. He says, how did you feel when you found out you were going to go into space? And what advice would you give any young person who wanted to be an astronaut? And then Maya just topped it off and said, were you nervous?
Wow, those are a whole bunch of questions. So let's see. I will do this in one fell swoop. I'll try to do a soliloquy on this. Um, so when I found out that I was selected for the astronaut program, was probably pretty thrilling, and I felt really excited about it. Obviously, been down at Kennedy Space Center, um, seen what not Kennedy, I'm sorry, Johnson Space Center, which is where the astronaut office is, and went through a whole interview process. And you're sitting around waiting to see whether or not you're going to be selected. And when I got the call, I was just absolutely thrilled. And I stayed up at night, did two aerobics classes. I was living in Los Angeles just to work off some of the energy. So it was very exciting to hear. I was in the astronaut program, and then when you're selected for a mission, I was very excited because my mission was also with the Japanese Space Agency, which meant that I was going to spend a lot of time overseas working in Japan. Was I nervous? Um, yeah, you're nervous just because you're doing something new. You're sitting on tons of high explosives, but I wasn't afraid because it was something that I had decided I wanted to do. I was in that moment. I should also tell you, I was in the first class of astronauts after the Challenger accident.
Hmm.
And so my application was in at the time of the Challenger accident, and I knew these were things that it was not something that was not without danger and without risk. But I had done things before in my life. So what we skipped over is, so I was yes in the I was a chemical engineer as an undergraduate, but I also majored in African American studies and had an opportunity to go overseas and do things. I went to medical school, learned about different illnesses. I was the area Peace Corps medical officer in Sierra Leone and Liberia. So by the time I got to the astronaut program, I had done a lot of things, and I had been in some places that may have been kind of scary and that had really taxed you before. And so I was pretty confident and set in where I was going. What would I suggest anybody do? So going into space and being a space crew is changing, and I can't tell you where it's going to end up. But right now, in terms of being a professional astronaut, you usually have to have a degree in a science field. What does that mean? Physics, chemistry, engineering, geology, mathematics. You have to have a degree in a science field, and you have to have advanced experience in that field. They also want you to have a very broad breadth of experience. That broad breadth of experience is because everything that you see that happens in space exploration right now, most of the photographs, all of those, they're taken by astronauts. When you see them, people are looking down. You have to, you have, if you have a crew on the station, they have to be physically fit. Whether you're doing spacewalks, you want to have normal physiology. So it's good to have a depth of experience, but do something that you're interested in, because you're more than likely you're going to do well, you're going to do better if you're working in a field that you want to go into, that you really love. And the other thing is you can't be guaranteed that you're going to be selected, and there's some astonishing people that I know who were not selected for the astronaut program. They do remarkable work, and they're remarkably happy because they're doing the work that they love. But then there's always so many other ways, so many things that can happen. So I would say find something that you're passionate about, and work through that. Work through that.
So Lucy says that you're her hero, and she wants to be either an astronaut or an astrophysicist when she grows up. And so she'd like to know what's your favorite part of being in space, and as well as do you like being an astronaut, a doctor, or a teacher better?
So
And you're
let me
in
just
a group of teachers,
so I think that we're always teaching. You were making a. I would say, what was it? What's your name? What's the name of the,
Lucy.
the Lucy? One of the assumptions people make is you could be one thing, and
Right.
that you have to like one thing or the other. So why do I have to choose? I don't have to choose. When I'm an astronaut, I'm still teaching. But I want to go on from the astronaut piece was 6 years of my life. I continue to work in space exploration now with 100 Year Starship, which is about trying to ensure that we have the capabilities for human interstellar flight beyond our solar system to another star in 100 years, to establish an organization to make those things happen. Remember what I told you in the beginning, that the issue for me was not a job, but it was the person I intended to be. One who had challenges, one who was creative, one who made a difference in this world, one who constantly learned new things and explored and went new places. You can continue exploring lots of different ways. So it's not one or the other. Sometimes you find a job that fits you exactly perfectly, but then you can evolve. You do new things. Teaching is very much a part of me. The first thing that I did when I came out of NASA is I started something called the International Science Camp, The Earth We Share. And it was about science literacy, training teachers in experiential education, working with 12 to 16-year-olds, and coming up with a curriculum that made sure that STEM had some STEM, science and technology and mathematics, that the students knew what it had to do with them. So they answered questions like, design the world's perfect house. How many people can the earth hold? And they had to work in teams to come up with the answers. So, this is part of education and teaching, but it's also part of how do I connect with the world? How do I leave, make a difference that I was here? So I think that, you don't have to choose just one. You don't have to choose just one.
So you were a mission specialist. What kinds of things does a mission specialist do on a shuttle?
Okay, so this is going to be our last space question. Want to ask anything else in it? Because all of these you can find out on your own. See, let me tell, and I'll tell you a story while I get there. But my mother once, and I talk about this book where sometimes you have to press people. I was doing science projects. Always had science projects, and I I was in high school. I was 15 years old. I was jazzy. I was jazzy, right? What do you mean? And I thought I knew a lot. And my mother said, "Why don't you do a different kind of science project?" And she said, and I said, "What?" She said, "Why don't you do a project on sickle cell anemia?" And it goes on from there. I didn't know what sickle cell anemia was. She challenged me to go look things up. And then I ended up going and working with some people at Cook County Hospital Laboratory, Hematology Laboratory, coming up with a whole project around sickle cell anemia, new compounds, getting a remarkable education, learning things about electrophoresis, and writing off to the National Institutes of Health, working with papers that researchers were writing that I had to learn a whole set of terminology in order just to read the papers. And the reason why I say that is because having people tell you answers that are easy for you to find is sometimes doesn't give you the best experience. So I'm going to tell you what a mission specialist does, but I'm going to challenge folks to ask me questions that you can't just go online and look and find. A mission specialist, there are two types of astronauts in the NASA program right now, basically. They're pilots and mission specialists. Back in the days of the shuttle, basically the pilots took the shuttle up, the mission specialist brought it down. Now they're changing because we're going on station. It's a very different kind of phenomenon, but they still bring a lot of pilots out of the military, test pilots, and they bring mission specialists who have very pronounced set of skills in the sciences. But I would challenge you to go look that one up and spend some time going in depth with it and trying to understand what the pieces are, because those are really easy ones. Ask me something you can't necessarily find.
So, what's the best part of your job now? I mean, you are everywhere. You have boundless energy. You just did an interview for the Washington Post the other day, just talking about race in America. You're a woman who, you walk around the city of DC and you see the orange jumpsuit in places on the side of buildings. And, a lot of the students online and even us old kids think about what does it look like from, this far above the earth, what can I see? How does it feel? What is weightlessness like? And those are things that you have to experience in order to know.
Well, so you got it back in there. I see you
Yeah,
slid back over to space, but that's okay.
I'm listening.
so the so the we have this conception that space changes you, and it does. I would say if you don't have some revelation, you're not paying attention. And the view back down at Earth is just sunny because the Earth is such a beautiful color. That's part of the reason why this book has this color. You see that color in there? The Earth almost iridesces that kind of color, and that thin layer of atmosphere is like that. And when I looked at it, it helped me to recognize something I always believed. When people say save the earth, they're mistaken. The earth will be here. We may not be here. What I was struck by was the sheer beauty and strength of this planet, of the universe, and felt very connected with the rest of the universe. And I recognize that humans, we have a misconception that the earth needs us. It does not. It does not, but we do need the earth. We do need to treat it in such a way that it doesn't develop an atmosphere that doesn't support our life form. There's another part of that. When we talk about looking down, we think of we have to be somewhere else to look down at the earth. And certainly looking from space gives us a perspective. It gives us a perspective that's very vital for different types of technology, agriculture, lots of different things, weather, so much. However, I would challenge people to say looking up can be just as profound. If you think about it, space exploration is really built on people looking up 1,000 generations ago when they started to recognize that that little speck of star, that little speck of light is moving. right? And they recognized how it moved relative to the position of other specks of light. They navigated with the stars. The planet uh, cycles for growing food, for tides, all of that with the stars. It is as profound to look up. I remember as a child looking up at the clouds and wondering what they were. It is a profound experience because it can help you be in the present, which is so much of what we need these days. So you asked, what is it like with the whole Race in America series, walking around DC, seeing the orange flight suit? Is that I want to make sure that people understand it makes a difference what you do with your place at the table. So I can talk about my experience in space forever, but what's more important is how do I make sure that I use the perspective that I got from space, or the perspective I've got from having been an astronaut, and apply it to the other work that I do, or the perspective that I gained before I ever became an astronaut to apply it to space exploration. How does that travel through? Um, so it had to do with the Earth we share, right? I recognize we share this planet. So that's one of the first things I did. Wanted to work with students and teachers and to help to promote STEM literacy. This is starting back in 1994. It helps me talk about the margin, the safety and risk, right? We so frequently right now we're in a pandemic, and we have people who are questioning. Really doesn't care about the politics.
No.
Really, really, the viruses really don't care. So how do we get people to a level of science literacy that we understand? Yes, there are particular ways and policies that may be put into place. But when we start talking about statistics and things like that, how do we have the numeracy, the ability to understand what these statistics mean? Like we talk about the vaccines, what is a value, what's valuable about the vaccines, or how we make the vaccines. Everybody doesn't have to have, I'm not saying you have to have the knowledge about how do you make everything about mRNA or adenovirus or whatever the carrier is for the vaccine, but you do need to be able to figure out what it means to you. We do need policymakers who can understand. Um, you can understand risk and benefits. Really,
Yeah, you can. Talk about your time as a physician in Sierra Leone and how rewarding that was for you.
so I as a medical student, I went to Kenya and I worked with the Flying Doctors. I also worked in the Cambodian refugee camp my fourth year in medical school. Um, and I found that I really loved medicine in developing countries. A very are in a context where you had to do your own lab work. I shouldn't just say in a developing country where you were challenged to really do histories and physicals, and you were challenged to do your own lab work and think about how you take care of people in a very different way than you think about here. So my in Sierra Leone, I was the area Peace Corps medical officer. I was responsible for the healthcare of the volunteers and the State Department personnel. I was on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And I was 26 when I started. I was younger than a lot of the volunteers and younger than everyone in the State Department, yet I was responsible for their health. And the thing that I learned there, just to put it encapsulated, is do your job
Mhm.
and know your purpose. And sometimes people will get irritated with you when you do your job and you don't allow them to interfere with your job. And the um, my job was to make sure people stayed healthy and to help them when they weren't healthy. It was not just to make everybody else feel like we're one of the gang. My first and primary responsibility was to my patients and their health. And I think that's one of the lessons that I've carried with me. And that comes back. I can go back, and that confidence that my parents helped to instill in me, and the teachers, and all of those pieces, they roll up too, and they're rolling through today because it never really goes away. You still have to learn. I think that's the one thing that is so exciting about the gold standard that the board is, right? That you're continuing learning, that you don't that that's part of the process, that you're continuing to learn.
So, what's your next big thing?
I'm doing it right now.
I'm
Isn't
fascinated by
going
what
to another star enough?
Yes, I'm absolutely fascinated by that. And
So,
just the physics of it all, and how it happens once get past gravity here on Earth, and how it's different propulsion when you're in where there's no gravity. So that's
so when
amazing.
100 Year Starship was about, um, it was about making sure that there are the capabilities for human interstellar flight in 100 years, not designing a starship, but making sure the capabilities exist, and to help to create an environment such big things could be done. And in fact, the name of the proposal that we wrote was called "An Inclusive, Audacious Journey Transforms Life Here on Earth and Beyond." And the first word was inclusive, inclusive across ethnicity, gender, and geography, but also inclusive across disciplines, because nothing that big can happen with just one group of people, one discipline, one country. And just tell you really quickly the difference between going to Mars and going to interstellar, right? So, our closest neighboring star is the Proxima Centauri system, Alpha Centauri. It's 4.2 light years away, 25 trillion miles. That's the distance light travels in 4.2 years. Light travels from the sun to the earth in 8 minutes, and that's 93 million miles. So Alpha Centauri is a long ways away. Voyager, which is a probe that was launched in 1977. It's been traveling at over 35,000 miles per hour since then. It's just left our solar system. And if it were headed toward Alpha Centauri, it'd take 50,000 years to get there. So we have to go faster, to your point about propulsion, right? There is not enough chemical propulsion in our entire solar system to power a vehicle that could carry humans to another star in a reasonable period of time. What is reasonable? 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? No, so we're going somewhere, 1% the speed of light, 10% the speed of light. We have to have a completely different propulsion system. We have to have fission, which is tearing atoms apart, but we have to be able to control and generate and store tremendous amounts of energy. Fission, fusion, which powers the sun, antimatter. Each step of those is an incredible order of magnitude of energy. Imagine if we're able to go a little way along that step, what it would mean to life here on Earth, to be able to generate, control, and store that kind of energy safely. Think about what happens if you're going on a 10-year journey or 20-year journey. You have to carry everything you need with you. You have to have error detecting equipment. You have to know about the human microbiome, right? We have to know about the biome in the soil that helps to fix nitrogen in plants, because you can't store your food, right? And you can't stop for groceries because you're going that fast, you can't slow down. So we have to understand so much more about agriculture, about plant health, about human health, about the ecosystem that we live in, that gets replenished on this planet all the time, and we're not aware of all of that. We have to understand a lot about economic systems, that we could invest in something like this, and how do we get a return on the investment. And I think the long pole in the tent is human behavior. Just think about it. Human behavior. Um, I go in suspended animation. We have 500 people on board. You wake me up and I'm not doing what you tell me to do. I work in teams. I'm just going to tell you the truth. I mean, it's like, well, no, you were in charge when we left, but that was then, this is now. How do we learn how to behave? And those are the fundamental issues that we have in the world today. And so, one of the things that's exciting to me about the interstellar journey is that it mirrors the challenges that we face on this planet, on this starship. That of energy, that of fair resource consumption, not destroying the environment, our ecosystem, our life support system, so that we won't be able to survive. There's so many parallels to it, which is what I find fascinating. And the other part of our proposal was that transforms life here on earth and beyond. So we believe every step of the way we should be connecting space exploration and its benefits, its challenges, the insight to life here on earth and improving life here on earth.
I'm glad you said that because most people don't know why we go into space. They just think it's there and we should go. And just thinking about what we learn about ourselves and what we learn about what we can do here and improve here, yes, is why we go.
And when I'm looking at this, right, the reason why I'm holding this up is because everybody will pick up their smartphone and they'll do their GPS systems, and you're holding a space receiver in your hand,
Right.
right? We look at weather satellites and we forget they're satellites, they're in space. We look at materials, so many things, but it's really also about perspective. How different is the world? So you're looking at that world back. It's a perspective as well.
So one last question, and it doesn't have to be a long answer because I ask everybody this. Are we alone in the universe?
Um,
You knew I was gonna ask.
no, well, so it would just be ridiculous if you're saying, is this planet the only planet with life?
I don't think so.
How could that be? And it's just too much universe for that to be the case. The issue was, will we recognize it? Does it look like our carbon-based life form? I don't know. But the likelihood that we're the only life in this universe is, I think it's infinitesimal. And I also, in terms of sentient life, we're not the only sentient life on this planet. I think humans very frequently get it all mixed up. We get it very mixed up. That we believe that we are the only bet. We are not the only bet in town. That's the reason why we have to do more to support ourselves.
Exactly. Well, this has been amazing. I know everybody has enjoyed getting to know, the other side of the astronaut, the engineer, the doctor, and what got you where you are, how curious you are, and what you still have left to do. So we're excited. We can't wait. And I know there are some young people who are on tonight who are thinking, pinching themselves that they got to be in the space.
I'm holding up the Star Trek picture.
We were going to get there. You told me not to go back to space, but I remember your 25th anniversary out in Los Angeles under the sitting at the table, and Michael Della Torre, who was on NBCT out in Los Angeles, and I were there together, and we were with Nichelle Nichols.